Hello and welcome to this week's episode of GIANT's Healthy Innovators TV. I'm your host, I'm Barry Shrier, and I'm the founder of GIANT Health. First of all, we'd like to thank all of our listeners and viewers from around the world. We love engaging with the international community of healthcare, technology, and innovation people. And we're glad that you hopefully are finding our episodes interesting, informative, and worthwhile. Our vision is to improve the health and the well-being of people around the world by supporting and facilitating innovation and enabling healthcare providers to adopt new technologies and innovations in order to deliver better healthcare at lower costs. So we'd like to thank our sponsors as well. Today we have Karim Marucchi from Crowd Favorite, who we'll introduce in a minute. We'd also like to thank Crowd Favorite as one of our most valuable sponsors and supporters. We'd also like to thank McKinsey, our knowledge partner, and Vodafone Business, our sponsor. We love working with all of our partners, sponsors, exhibitors, and we'd like to say thank you for your ongoing support. So first of all, introducing Karim Marucchi. Hello, Karim. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Barry. How are you?
Yeah, doing excellent. Thank you. And great to see you. And obviously, once again, thank you so much for your valued support and participation in GIANT Health 2022.
Absolutely.
What I'd like to ask you is, if you don't mind, let's just begin by talking a little bit about your career and any highlights you'd like to share with our viewers from around the world, and also how you got to where you are right now. I think the personal story is always really, really interesting.
Absolutely. I actually came to digital and the internet through a circuitous route of getting my master's degree in architecture.
Wow.
Yeah. And the day that I received my degree, I received a job offer I couldn't refuse from Autodesk, the software company.
Okay.
And I was so intrigued by the technology in the very early 90s that I decided I really wanted to check out some technology.
Sure. What did Ondesk have to do with architecture?
Oh, Autodesk are the makers of AutoCAD,
Okay.
the piece of software for
For
architects.
sure. Yeah.
But very quickly, I realized I had a gift for explaining technology. I did not have a gift for writing technology.
Yeah.
So I quickly pivoted in the early 90s to found one of the first interactive internet web shops of Los Angeles in California.
Wow. Nice.
So we were able to work with some of the first clients who decided they wanted to make websites, and created some interesting campaigns early on. And the last 28 years has just been a lot of interesting learning.
Yes.
As this thing has grown from a web page to really the premier way of how people are communicating these days, and
Absolutely.
organizations really manage their communication.
Yes. Is it technology per se that attracts you, or what else?
Believe it or not, it's the change. So,
Okay.
A lot of us who started outside technology are like, oh my God, it changes so quickly. How do we keep up with this? What's interesting for me and what's kept me here so long is the fact that the change is manageable, and there's a certain way to look at it where you can really realize that there's a throughput, and there's a path to what will stick and what is a trend, like fashion.
Right.
So as long as you're keeping an eye on where the value is and staying out of trendy fashions or things that are just getting attention for a moment,
Yes.
it really is something that will allow individuals and organizations to just experience the sort of the cutting edge of what we're becoming as a society.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's extremely interesting. We do have, of course, an awful lot of engineering-based technical leaders coming onto the show, and I'm not technical in terms of my background in engineering. And so, of course, for lots of people, the tech is intrinsically interesting. But I think what you have highlighted, which is the impact of the tech, is, of course, much more profound and meaningful for society at large.
Yeah, because what ended up happening was I found myself in the early 2000s working with large enterprise organizations.
Okay.
And there were these large software packages which were very expensive, and they were fixing the clients to one road.
Exactly.
So no matter what industry you were in, you were stuck on whatever their vision is of how you should proceed in technology.
Yes.
So I very early on found open source. I'm not sure if you're familiar with open source, but it's a very interesting way of looking at software, and
Yep.
one that people have a lot of questions about normally.
Sure. Yeah. No, very keen to talk about open source in this conversation. And I mean, I certainly understand the commercial goal of an individual business to try and take steps to lock their customers into their proprietary systems. But of course, and we'll get onto this in the conversation today, and I'm looking forward to it. That's not necessarily advantageous for the customer, especially if the customer, for example, is a big hospital group or a national healthcare provider or that type of thing. So there's that interesting tension, and there is a good solution, which absolutely is open source, and quite excited to talk about that. While we're still just talking about your career, tell
Yeah,
us about how you got to Crowd Favorite, and tell us a little bit about Crowd Favorite, please.
absolutely. So my career, as I said, was based in with enterprise clients, trying to help them figure out how to advance in the internet. Then what ended up happening is, as we found out where things were going, I really had this interest in open source, not because it's a complete alternative, but how do you help clients manage their own path, take control of where the technology is going?
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that the closed source systems are bad. These platforms are amazing. There's a lot of very interesting medical and health based platforms out there. But how do you keep control while using them?
Yep.
I don't advocate that in crowd with open source you're not using them. We advocate that you take control of what your path is. So the idea that started in roughly 2007-8 was, how do we use open source to control that path?
Okay.
So I started a company to work on that, and very quickly I was contacted by the Disney company, which was a previous client of mine,
Okay.
because they had seen that I was publishing about open source, and they asked me to help them make a decision about how they could move from a closed source system to relying on open source and still connect to some other systems. And I'm very happy to say that my team and I helped them make the decision to move from a closed source system to the WordPress platform very early on in 2010. And then that company started doing so well that we started collaborating. It was called Velomedia. We started collaborating with Crowd Favorite. Crowd
Okay.
Favorite was originally founded by one of the original founders of WordPress.
Oh, wow.
Alex King was literally the fifth person to commit code to the project,
Okay.
and really was instrumental in helping push that forward in the community early on, along with Matt
Hmm.
Barnwig.
Hmm.
So we collaborated with them, worked on other projects, and by 2012, we were working so well together that we ended up merging the companies.
Oh, nice.
So basically, since 2010 or so, we've just been focused on extending. Crowd Favorite is focused on extending what our clients can do with open source,
Okay.
not to move them away from other platforms, but to use open source as a hub, if you will,
Okay.
to use these other platforms when necessary, or take control of their own data, which is a very popular subject today. How do you
Absolutely.
manage your own data?
Yeah.
And really extend it. And there's instances where we work with McKinsey and other partners. It was a pleasure to see them at your show, by the way.
Hmm.
So the consultancies come to us because we are experts in how to manage using open source to
Yes. Yeah.
cut your costs and take control of where you're going. So we don't
Exactly.
sell any one particular product. We don't try to get people off of any one particular product.
Oh,
Our
okay.
consultancy is about connecting the dots.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that you're, how do you say it? You're practicing what you preach, so to speak.
Yes, exactly.
It'd be rather ironic if you were preaching open source and said you have to use our systems.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Well, look at Karim. Thank you very much. Really helpful introduction, and obviously, congratulations on your impressive career and what you guys have built at Crowd Favorite. Very keen to hear more about that. But before we dive down into that, though, one of the reasons that we exist, Giant Health. We are an international community of people in healthcare, tech, and innovation. We convene, as you know, we do the big annual event, and it's about bringing people together for knowledge share and cross-referencing and cross-fertilization. And there's so many good things happening in terms of tech innovation and adoption of new technology in other industries, which people in healthcare struggle to learn about because obviously everybody's busy with the day job. So it's our job to help with that. And this is something I'm very excited about in terms of your expertise and your experience. So Karim, for example, how are other industries solving these these requirements for better customer experience, better personalization, digital advancement? Would you mind sharing any experience you have from other industries before we dive into the healthcare sector?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's very applicable, actually. Um, I'll use Disney as an example because we were talking about them earlier.
Yeah.
Disney has spent the last 25 years innovating, but also making some giant mistakes and learning from those mistakes. They're
Okay.
one of the most interesting companies at how they adapt. We both know, because we have healthcare clients as well in the US, we both know that healthcare isn't one of the fastest or most adaptive sectors out there. But actually, that's an advantage in this case, because if we look at the example of Disney, Disney early on treated technology as another channel. You know, for those of us who share a certain age, we used to think of print, television, radio as three separate channels, and while we'd have a unified approach, we would manage them separately, right? So originally they just said, okay, we have a fourth channel now. We're going to deal with that fourth channel. What ended up happening, though, is as the technology moves forward, it's no longer about just putting text and images on a page.
No.
It's more about the communication. It's the first medium that is truly interactive.
Exactly.
It's the closest thing to literally getting them on the phone,
Exactly.
getting in front of them, right?
Absolutely.
So they very quickly understood that, and they moved on from that, but they were still treating things in separate channels.
Okay.
The most interesting thing, to just sum up the last 20 years of growth, has been what's become the buzzword today of omni-channel. Now, I'm not into the giant buzzwords, but just so to explain to the audience if they haven't heard it before.
Yes. Yes.
Concept here isn't to think of these things as separate channels. For instance, the way you interact with your clients on the phone, the way you interact with your patients in the clinic, the way you interact with your patients one-on-one, the way you interact with your patients through your staff.
Okay.
You don't think of those as separate channels.
No.
You think of those as one interaction, one relationship, and these are separate tools that you use on the focus of that relationship.
Sure.
So as the technology has gotten more complex, and now we have everything from telemedicine to AI-driven data to all the things that have to do with the customer experience, how the clinicians are interacting with the patients. What ends up happening is you have to literally take away the concept of these are separate things and understand how one is interacting with the other. So when Disney did that, to give the example, and they started bringing on new businesses like Hulu and Disney Streaming and Marvel and all these other business units,
Right.
they would not only connect to the customer data, which is a controversial thing these days,
Okay.
but they would look internally at their data of how they're interacting and where they're getting better results.
Okay.
And they would start looking across how they did that. Now, that's a massive undertaking at a company like Disney.
I can imagine.
But also, if you're running a smaller healthcare group as a clinician, it's a massive, for your idea of no matter what your size is, of trying to pull all these things together, because you're trying to run a business and help your patients. So what they did is, how do we bring these things together? So omnichannel was the idea of trying to bring the interactions so that the employees of Disney would be able to more easily interact with these channels.
Okay.
Right. So instead of just publishing a web page through the interface, you would actually also deal with the customer relationship management software. You'd also deal with the email system. You'd also deal with making changes on the phone system, that
Oh,
kind of
okay.
thing, right?
Okay. Hmm.
Um, and then when you have social media and you have all the other things that come into this, they just started creating this flywheel of information so that internally, even more importantly than the client information, internally, they could iterate on what they're doing without having to rebuild. Because
Yes.
having to move from one system to another, having to redo your processes all the time is the most expensive thing a business can do.
I can imagine. This flywheel concept is extremely interesting. Are you okay to elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, in the Disney example, for
Yeah.
instance, what would end up happening is that they would use information that was working well in one section of their business,
Okay.
and they'd say, okay, how does that apply over here? And they wouldn't apply it blindly. They do a little bit of analysis, and they'd
Sure.
say, what tools have we used here that work, and how do we adapt them over here, right? So in sort of this omni-channel world where now you're not thinking of web pages and email and social media as separate, but you're saying, I might have one interaction on email and I have another interaction on the web. When they're on my website and they've looked up these services
Yep.
and they've responded to this one email or this one phone call or they've called
Sure.
in, how do I link that information? They've spent years trying to figure that out. And
Oh, nice.
the good news is over the last 15 years, we've gone from something around the order of 20 or 30 platforms out there for managing marketing technology
Wow.
to almost 9,000 platforms.
Insane.
Today, there's almost 9,000 marketing technology platforms out there. And you'd think to yourself, well, how the heck do I manage that? It's
That's
impossible.
crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. But the good news is no matter what your needs are, there's probably pieces of a platform out there that are
Okay.
right for you. So they've
Okay.
become very good at understanding we're going to use platform A for email, platform B for the web, platform C for social media. How do we tie it together so that our staff isn't constantly just using 18 different platforms?
Right. And
That's the key to omnichannel.
and taking this back to open source, why is open source better in the analogy that you have just given of wanting to find, what's the word for it, best of breed or whatever in all these different areas?
So what we're able to do as a consultancy, because we don't care what platform somebody uses, we're just trying to
Okay.
make it more efficient for
Yeah,
our clients. What
sure.
we've been able to do is, if you think of a bicycle wheel, we use open source as a hub
Okay.
where the goal is that our clients like Disney interact with the hub,
Right.
and then it reaches out through the spokes to all the different platforms, which are sort of like the tire of the wheel, right?
Brilliant.
Where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Um, so you're only interacting with that rather than having to interact with all the different platforms themselves.
Yes.
So you're still using those platforms, but you're using it in a way that, believe it or not, it sounds like, well, how much am I going to spend on that hub? The cost savings are higher than what you spend on actually interacting normally with all those and having to churn with them. We have case studies and a proven way of showing clients that using open source as a hub will not only keep them in control of these vendors, because that's all
Exactly.
technology is a bunch of vendors, keep them in control of the vendors, but also keep them in control of where they're going as a technology company. Because
Perfect.
the most as an organization, because the most expensive thing for Disney was retraining process. That's the most
Whereas,
expensive thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's extremely interesting. Now, it's extremely logical, makes an awful lot of sense, and thank you for the good introduction as well, because I think an awful lot of our listeners might not have the expertise in open source or platforms and so forth. And I certainly love the flywheel analogy. But help us to understand, why does this make any difference in healthcare? How do we? I mean, all good for Disney, but what are healthcare's challenges, and why would they want to look at this?
Right. Well, exactly. So, we've had the pleasure of working with quite a few healthcare companies here in the US.
Oh, okay.
And what we found is there's a direct correlation in how clinicians and healthcare companies are having to deal with technology, because they're going through the same things today that clients like Disney, Starbucks, and others were going through years ago. The
Right.
difference is on the bad news side of things, there's even more choices. But on the good news side of things, we've had experience in other industries. So now we can help sort of ratchet that down.
And
There's
is it
still,
clear,
yeah,
how clear is it that what works in other industries can be applied in healthcare? This is not an absolute given, or is it?
right. So it is clear because there's certain things that are ever present, like the fact that you're dealing with patients, right? Disney calls them guests, their clients. They call them guests because they're guests on their websites, they're guests in the movie theater, they're guests at their parks, right?
Okay,
Um, so that's the first aspect. The second aspect is speaking about the behavior of those guests. It's very in the consumer products world and the Disney world, you can understand how they're working.
sure.
Healthcare already completely understands their customer base, their patients, right? How do you
Sure.
apply that, the behavioral? How do you apply that to the technology? That's key. And then there's unifying things about the very specific things about the clinician relationship, the relationship of how the patient moves through the relationship with the doctor and the hospital,
Okay,
right?
sure.
Disney's done a great job of basically identifying where the journey begins and where the journey ends.
Oh, okay. So, of course, what might be called for Disney or people in other industries, the so-called customer journey, happens to be almost identical to the patient pathway in
Yes.
healthcare. And
Yeah,
so you change the name of the phrase, but it's the exact same basic principle with the same requirements to improve.
absolutely. Now, here's the key. How do you do that without driving your operations team crazy and
Yes,
retraining the staff?
exactly. Exactly. And the answer is
The answer is technology, which you're going to hear from a lot of places, but not technology at any cost. Not technology by just committing to one platform that's going to solve all your problems,
no.
but technology that works for your existing workflows. One of the key points that we bring to our clients is don't adapt to the technology. Find the technology that's going to adapt to your workflow.
Nice. Nice. Say that again, because that's golden.
So we try to instill this on day one of working with our clients. Don't adapt to the technology. Find the technology that's going to help you on your journey, that's going to adapt to you.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really the bottom line, the key.
Nice.
And we're known within our industry, and that's why we work with Providence Healthcare and others. Um, we're known for being able to mediate that conversation because, again, we have no dog in the fight. We're not trying to sell any one platform. We're not trying to do anything other than guide our clients through their choices to keep costs as low as possible, the healthcare companies,
Sure.
and advance through this crazy journey that is technology with the minimum possible headache to their staff.
Nice. Nice. Could you elaborate on any healthcare examples that might help our healthcare community to grasp this with more depth?
Well, so to not read off a bullet list, I'll say the presentation I gave at the Giant Health event actually has slides that are very rich in content, and that content didn't just come from us. That actually came from Providence Healthcare, their
Oh,
own digital
okay.
team. They've actually broken down in our presentation how a consumer or a patient flywheel may work.
Yes.
And there's a link to that on the page that we've set up where they can just download the same presentation that I gave. And
Excellent.
it goes into a
Excellent.
lot of detail
Yeah.
of which pieces that a healthcare company may want to look at.
Yeah.
But I think to go into too much detail would be crazy. But the bottom line here
No,
is,
understood.
yeah, the bottom line here is, how do you approach technology? Not in a way of I'm looking for some interesting features, but I'm looking to how to solve the patient relationship on a whole,
Yes.
without creating so much turmoil for the staff of the healthcare company. That's
Exactly. There's two parts, aren't there? There's the problem, which a technology, a platform, a group of platforms can solve. But there's another piece to this, which is the, how do you say it? The people working in operations in the organization who have to learn about and use that technology and deploy it successfully and get all of their own stakeholders using it.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, this is so interesting. For the benefit of all of our viewers right now who might be watching this on the Giant Health YouTube channel, we will have the links at the bottom. So for all of our viewers, do please look at the links underneath the film here to get access to the presentation which Karim gave at Giant Health 2022 back in December in London, England, which will give you directly access to all the information he's talking about now. Karim, this is so interesting and this is so profound. The fact that there are these two, if you will, parts to the puzzle. There's the problem with the solution, but then there's the, how do you say it? There's the implementing of the solution, which is in and of itself, not an insignificant task. So let's say some of our listeners will be working in large hospital groups, large regional or even national healthcare organizations here in the UK, elsewhere in Europe. What would be examples where they might be saying to themselves, well, I think I've got a problem. How do I know if I need to talk to Karim about this? What would be a problem they would have in their mind, or what would be an ambition or a goal of theirs, which would lead them to correctly give you a phone call to start talking about this?
Absolutely. And the goal isn't necessarily to just engage right away, but we have plenty of first-time conversations with staff of large organizations or consultants,
Nice.
where they're saying, we either have a large monolithic piece of software that we don't know how to advance or get away from, or we feel trapped, or they're saying, we're stuck with all these choices. We're looking at a new process in technology. We're stuck with all these choices. Can we have a conversation around how to approach those choices so that we maintain the control? Because what ends up happening, for those of you who have gone through it and are hearing me, what ends up happening is you go out saying, I'm looking for these features, but then you end up in a process where you're looking at one platform versus another platform on the features, and very quickly you end up on a one-way road about what's happening with your data, what's happening with how you can interact with other platforms, being stuck with a platform, what's called in the business anti-churn practices.
Yes, sure.
Trying to get them to stay on a platform.
Yes.
So we like to have conversations around, what are your goals for your customer journey? What are your goals for your staff? And what does your staff makeup look like? And your training look like for that staff? Because that's where you should be starting. The features of the technology will come as a secondary step. But if you don't look at it through that lens, you're really just, you're buying a car based on its color, not on its performance, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. No, it's a really good analogy. Yeah.
So what we'd like to do is say, look, we're happy to have a conversation with anybody, and if it makes sense after we talk for an hour, awesome. If not, don't worry about it. But the point is looking at it in a different light than the traditional procurement method of looking at software.
Okay. That's excellent.
And
yeah.
One of my best friends here in Atlanta is a surgeon. And he's in love with this one particular CRM platform for his practice.
Okay.
But it's limiting for him in how it connects to the rest of his business.
Okay.
That's an example of where we'd say, okay, how do we help you? You want to stay on that platform? That's great. How do we help connect these other pieces so it's easier for your staff. Because the staff ends up having 4 or 5 browser tabs or applications open just to have a set of interactions with patients. And that just doesn't make sense.
With one patient, yeah.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Or the hospital, or this, or that, or the other, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it just makes sense to say, let me not look at the feature, let me look at how my interaction and workflow needs to be. And it's a very quick conversation to just say, is this the right road for us or not?
Sure.
It doesn't, we won't tell people, hey, hire us, engage us as a consultancy, and in 3 months we'll tell you the right answer.
Yeah.
In a preliminary conversation, it's very quick to just say, is it the right direction for you to look at or not? Because
Exactly.
sometimes, looking at 2 or 3 pieces, it's not the right answer. You
Exactly.
should stay with what you're doing, or
Sure.
look at other options. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Excellent. Hey, well, look at Karim. I wish we were actually sitting in the pub and we could have a pint and keep this conversation going for another hour or two, because this is so interesting. It's also quite profound when you note the vast amounts of resources that go into the acquisition and management of platforms in healthcare, and the challenges of the operational and the technical teams keeping these platforms running, scratching their head, trying to figure out how to glue this platform to this other platform, all of which is legacy stuff. And so anything you want to summarize? Unfortunately, we don't have too much time, but if there's anything you'd like to add, or any final observations or comments, and also as a business, how do we make contact with you?
Absolutely. So I encourage everybody, from healthcare executives to consultants to healthcare staff, look at the presentation that we've put up. We've put it up at crowdfavorite.com/giant health, and the link will be in the bottom, I'm sure.
Yes.
Because we have graphics there that just explain on an executive level the concepts, but we also have some very detailed graphics with our made by our partners at Providence Healthcare about how this applies. So
Okay.
clinicians, operations folks could really dig into some of this.
Oh,
And
excellent.
at that point, if they'd like to talk, great. We're a very low pressure organization here. We're not looking to do anything other than try and help promote what is a wonderful alternative to these closed source systems. Open source is really just a great way to look at how to help the organization move forward.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
we don't have to sell anything to do that. We just have to have a conversation.
Yes, yes. Superb. Karim, thank you so much. Once again, on behalf of everyone at Giant Health, we're extremely grateful for the sponsorship that Crowd Favorite provided us, and we're excited about growing our partnership with you guys. Such interesting and valuable offers to the healthcare sector. So I'd just like to say thank you for your time, obviously. And if you have any additional asks of our community, let us know. And very, very keen to work with you to bring you guys successfully in contact with the people who I think would benefit from conversations with you.
Thank you. And we look forward to Giant Health 2023.
Excellent.
We'll
Good
see you
stuff.
there.
Well, Karim, thank you so much. Good to speak with you. So
Thank you.
this has been Karim Marucchi, who's the CEO of Crowd Favorite. And he's joined us today from Atlanta. Glad that you're well and that you had a safe trip from London back to America before Christmas. Very keen to keep in touch with you. So on behalf of everyone at Giant, thank you all to our viewers and listeners from around the world. This has been this week's episode of Giant's Healthy Innovators TV. We're very proud to be sponsored by Crowd Favorite, and we appreciate their valuable support. If any of you guys want to engage with Karim, once again, look at the links at the bottom of this video. If you enjoy these videos, we'd love to continue producing them for your benefit. So remember, please, to like and to subscribe. And we invite everybody to go to the Giant website, www.giant.health, where you can learn more about Crowd Favorite and learn more about meeting them and the rest of our community at the Giant Health event. This year, it's the 22nd and 23rd of November in London, England. So we hope to engage with you during the year and to see you at the event. Karim, thank you. And thanks to all of our sponsors and viewers and listeners. And we hope you have a good week. All the best.
Thank you. Great to see you, Barry.